Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, debt slicers, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks, and all you Iranian nuke watchers out there. I know it's kind of like whale watchers out here in the Seattle area. There's a lot of Iranian nuke watchers out there. You can take guided tours. And welcome. I'm a useful idiot, and yes, it's now officially the afternoon, and my hair's still a mess, and I'm still drinking coffee. But it's Easter weekend, so I can do whatever I want. So anyway, interestingly enough, it's Easter weekend, and even though Jews don't believe in Jesus, let's discuss the resurrection of the potential for a little peace in the world with the diffusion of the potential for a war with Iran. I know that's kind of a long-winded stretch discussing this new nuclear agreement with Iran. So let me just skip right ahead and let's get to this nuclear agreement that's been announced that should nothing go wrong will be put in force in June 30th. So all the timetable of this shifting, which is nice to see a little fungibility out there negotiating these things. So the agreement itself looks pretty good. And undoubtedly the critics, Saudi Arabia, the neocons in the U.S. and Israel, will hate this deal, but everything I've seen so far makes it look like a pretty good deal, and what a radical restructuring of the Iranian nuclear program, and the oversight of it is unparalleled. So it's hard to find anything to criticize. Going from 19,000 centrifuges to 6,000, using older model centrifuges that give them a less chance to reconfigure them for weapons production. Plutonium removed, plutonium acquisition and production removed, uranium enrichment from over 9%, which would be weapons grade, down to around 3%, which is a massive reduction. Complete access to all sites with daily inspections. And interestingly enough, of course, these inspections, these daily inspections, unprecedented inspections of all their facilities have already been going on for the better part of a year and a half. And one of the things that makes this system successful now that's being negotiated is it's an entire supply chain system that's monitored. And that makes sense to me, that if they crunch the numbers at all points involved in the nuclear program in Iran, then they'll be able to catch any irregularities, especially on a daily basis. Spent fuel will be shipped out of the country. There's no new facilities for 15 years, and the inspections will go on for the next 25 years. For the next quarter of a century, these inspections will go on. I think that sort of speaks for itself. And let's also remember that the nuclear sanctions will remain intact, and so they won't be able to have access to a lot of unchecked nuclear technology and equipment over the years. And let's also remember this is a multilateral agreement. This isn't just between the United States and Iran. This is some major powers in the world today who all negotiated this. And it is an agreement. That's something to remember. I'll attach a very excellent interview with Phyllis Bennis below, a great intellect and expert on these issues. And she talks about the fact that it's not a treaty. It's an international agreement that has little to do with Congress. And I tend to agree with that. Once again, it's about whatever political dynamics are going on. It's not about the real issues with all this political wrangling and opportunism going on in Washington, D.C. Of course, the GOP were fine with Reagan, President Reagan, negotiating with the Soviet Union for thousands and thousands of known nuclear weapons, and called it verifiable as well. And I think this comparison to North Korea is ridiculous. North Korea is a very singular regime, and to paint Iran as insane, a not in control regime like that of North Korea, I think, is just part of the demonization of Iran. And we see the same thing with the demonization of Putin and Russia, so it's nothing new. And the only people that have interest in war in this scenario, of course, is Saudi Arabia and Israel. It's not in the interest of the United States at all. We have no real threat from Iran. And the fact is that Israel faces no real threat from Iran as well, being very heavily armed with their own nuclear arsenal. And I'll attach my companion piece to this video below about Israel's nuclear arsenal and how that needs to be a key component in any real negotiations about Iran's nuclear program. The fact that this agreement can be achieved in spite of this non-revelation of the Israeli nuclear program as part of the negotiations is pretty surprising in itself. And I also agree with Phyllis Bennis in that there really is no trust issue. These inspections are the most intrusive that have ever been done in history. And I also agree with Phyllis Bennis in the fact that could there be a better situation? Is war really better than this agreement? If anybody out there can answer that yes, war would be better than this agreement, I have to challenge their mental stability. And comparing this to appeasing Hitler is ridiculous. And to keep seeing this Hitler connection brought up every time they want to demonize someone, whether it's Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, Putin, or Noriega, or whoever, calling them the next Hitler is really getting old and being a cliche even in propaganda communities. And to drive that point home about is it really better to have a war than an agreement, we have a Washington Post editorial from Joshua Moravchik, and it was titled, quote, "War with Iran is probably the best option," unquote, which is probably one of the most ridiculous titles in geopolitical theories I've ever heard, that the war with Iran is probably the best option. And this is a kind of a backwards world we live in today, where, as Goebbels used to say, the biggest lies are the easy ones to sell. So then looking a little closer as far as Iran's nuclear program, let's look at some of the evidence. So we have 16 U.S. intelligence agencies who have said that Iran hasn't even begun any nuclear weapons program. And as we know, Iran themselves have said that they are not pursuing a nuclear weapons program, and any interest they had in pursuing it had ended as early as 2003, which I remind you is already 12 years ago. Israeli Mossad has already publicly admitted that Iran has no nuclear weapons program. It's recently came out that George W. Bush, in his own memoirs, points out the fact that they knew that Iran had no nuclear weapons program, according to intelligence agencies in the United States and Israel. We're seeing the same lie that has been used to get us into a war in Iraq, and the very same techniques are being used again. But why not? It's this many years later. It's probably going to work again at some point. And of course, the evidence again. Once again, we have Israel's own arsenal in history with nuclear weapons, and it's a duplication of what they apparently are accusing Iran of. And there's so much more to this narrative than the simplistic Iran has a bomb and we can't let them have a bomb. And that's one of the things that's been brought up in many other videos about all the factors that are involved here, besides this scenario of fear of Iran getting a bomb. This is an opportunity for Saudi Arabia and Israel to achieve regime change in Iran. That's what it's all about. They want to set terms that are a complete surrender and a submission to their will by Iran. It's not about a threat. It's about power. And it's about taking this opportunity, this window of opportunity, to create regime change and keep raising the bar. And Yemen reveals a lot of the lies about Iran, as we see. Of course, there is proxies in the Middle East that Iran supports, and this is not the video to go into that too much, but when we see the fact that Iran is not even involved in Yemen, and yet they are being given credit for creating more regional instability, and we see just a glimpse of this lie about who is spreading terrorism, because as we know, when one examines the facts, we have in reality Saudi Arabia being the instigator of a lot of global terrorism, far, far, far more than anything that can be pinned on Iran. And I also will attach below an interview with the former director of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, Robert Kelly, and I find him a much more credible source than a lot of the noise that's going on out there in the media and in the propaganda war, whether it's press TV, whether it's Israeli media, whether it's United States media or Russia Today. I'm looking at who's being interviewed, not the source of where he's being interviewed, and he has much to say, once again, about reiterating a lot of the ideas I've already talked about here. So some of the noise out there, people forget that Iran was helping the United States after 9/11. Ironically, it's ironic that a lot of people out there still think for some reason that Iran had any connection remotely to 9/11. And so it was only with Bush's announcement in his speech that there was an axis of evil, including Iran, and Iran was just as shocked as anybody else to hear this inclusion after they were willing to help with U.S. efforts after 9/11 happened. So where is this Iranian global network, terror network? They only service proxies like every other actor in the globe, and certainly in that region. And I find it somewhat encouraged that only 30% of Americans don't want this agreement. So that means 70% do. So that's good to see. That means at least a sizable amount of the GOP are also interested in having this march to war diffused. And I also found it rather ironic that we find the hardline GOP, particularly the 47 in Congress, and those bootlickers who have an affinity, and this is not an exaggeration, an affinity with the hardliners in Iran, because it turns out the hardliners in Iran want to limit the President Rouhani's political gains and fear he will gain in the polls if these negotiations are successful, and exactly how the GOP extreme feel in the United States. They don't want President Obama to have a signature piece of achievement for his presidency, which this would be. And this coupled with the potential that perhaps Obama will allow the creation of a Palestinian state through the UN would certainly go down as two of the greatest achievements of the 21st century, and certainly the opening years of the 21st century. And I'm sure the GOP is certainly not interested in allowing that sort of legacy. And that has a lot to do with what this is about, and one of the things that Phyllis Bennis brings up as well, and that's that a lot of this, particularly the GOP, has to do with the pressure from Christian Zionists, has to do with the pressure of AIPAC money on their campaigns. It has to do with the pressure of the fact that they know they're all going to have to count on Sheldon Adelson in any upcoming political campaigns. And it also has to do with the fact that they have put all their eggs in one basket with this recent letter and invitation not Netanyahu to come speak in Congress. And speaking of Netanyahu, we also have Netanyahu, of course, calling it a, quote, historic mistake, unquote. And I think that it would have been a historic mistake to end negotiations and bomb Iran. But of course, there's always potential for the historic mistake of bombing Iran to still happen. We have 2 more years, and all these bad actors are certainly willing to wait for the outcome that they really desire. And the GOP have been interested in undermining this effort by Obama all along, and certainly it would be nice if it had anything to do with any genuine fears of what Iran is capable of. But instead, I'm afraid it's only U.S. congressmen and people in our government serving their Israeli masters, their Israeli paymasters, and also, of course, towing the party line, which is another thing that I like to bitch about. So there we have it. There's going to be some other more propaganda war going on for the next couple of months while we see this negotiations continue to get hammered out and all the details talked over ad nauseum. And then we have, if this thing actually does go through, we will see a shift as more Iranian oil hits the market, and that could have some interesting effects as well, not to mention the uptick in economic activity involved with Iran. And one of the behind-the-scenes things that are going on that nobody's discussing, of course, is all the Western companies that are lined up once sanctions are removed. All the Western companies and every big name you can think of waiting in line to get involved in the Iranian economy. So there we have it. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.